Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new episode of CCIR Student Spotlight. My name is Oliver, and with us today, we're really glad to have Muskaan Agrawal, a current junior at the Quarry Lane High School in the Bay Area. So today, we're really glad to have Muskaan to come in and talk a little bit about her experience at CCIR, her experience working in particular with Dr. Keyvan Agassi from the University of Cambridge, on a project that concerns financial literacy and entrepreneurship, especially within the context of developing countries. So first things first, Muskaan, welcome.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. It's nice to meet you as well.
Yeah, so Muskaan, I think to begin, maybe you can just give a little bit of introduction about yourself. Maybe say a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and maybe how you first got interested in this particular area of study.
Yes, so I'm Muskaan, and I'm a junior at the Quarry Lane School here in the Bay Area, California. I've been really interested in entrepreneurship from a young age. And as I started to explore that and got into high school, I started to become more interested in fields of finance, including, corporate finance, financial literacy, etc. So when we were presented with the opportunity to do a research paper on a topic that interests us during the program here at Cambridge, I decided to learn more about financial literacy and its positive impacts in developing economies and entrepreneurship and like the overlap of the two. And I've gotten to learn a lot of cool things through my research.
Cool. So maybe you can begin by telling us a little bit more about your course. So I understand that you took the course with Keyvan, and the course really focused on the concept of entrepreneurship and how to put it into practice. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how that course worked, some of the basic themes in the course, and how that eventually led you into exploring financial literacy.
Yes, so the course actually was mainly focused on entrepreneurship and finance itself. We talked a lot about business model and the evaluation of a company and the different stages a business goes through, things like patents and copyright. We basically covered a lot of different topics under the fields of entrepreneurship, and we had a few classes on finance, and that's really when I figured out what my topic was going to be. And during the TA sessions, we would cover the same thing again, kind of in more depth and answer questions related to the different slides we had. And that's what kind of prompted me to look more into different things in finance. I knew I wanted to do a topic related to finance, but I wasn't really sure how to kind of tie that in with what we were learning. So that's how I ended on combining financial literacy and entrepreneurship.
Okay, so why don't you, if you're able to tell us a little bit about what your research was more concretely about.
Yes, so I mainly focused on first understanding what financial literacy is. That was one of the first things I started off with, and kind of the general impacts of financial literacy in general, like how it impacts countries across the world, how it impacts all types of people, and really just looking at that first. And then I started to get into the impacts of that on entrepreneurship and venture creation. So I found a lot of information about really cool studies that really show the connection between lack of financial knowledge and the success and failure rates of ventures. There was an example in Canada, an example in South Africa, and they really were able to show me the connection. And as I was researching these different things, I also found more information about how financial literacy is lacking in a lot of developing economies, and that really leads to people struggling with making decisions and lowers the entrepreneurial ventures that people take in these countries. So that's kind of what my paper outlines. It kind of summarizes the various studies that have been done on this topic, and then it views it from a holistic approach to create a conclusion about the impact of financial literacy on both entrepreneurship and developing economies and the overlap of the two.
Interesting. So I wonder, it sounds like you we're doing quite a lot of diagnostic work in terms of looking at what the problems are that confront potential entrepreneurs within developing economies. I wonder if you also explored or have thought about potential solutions to these sorts of problems.
Yeah, so I haven't really explored these solutions in my research paper, but as I was kind of researching and going through these papers, I did have a few ideas in my mind as I was running through different iterations of my paper. One of them being that I noticed there aren't many a lot of the financial services are not catered towards people from different backgrounds in the sense that they don't approach how various people approach money. So I did think that maybe creating, programs that really cater towards the way that people are thought to view money, will help make them more comfortable with dealing with money. For example, people in different countries may view money as something different than people in countries here in the Americas. So by creating something that could really like show them how to deal with their money in the ways that is most well known to them would kind of help break this like gap of financial illiteracy. That was one of the things I had thought about, but I'm sure there's lots of different solutions to something like financial literacy.
Mhm. Yeah, so I wonder, I'd want to hear a little bit more in terms of the details. So when you say that these developing economies, say, have a slightly different conception of what money is, do you have in mind maybe something like, I know that in quite a lot of cultures, for example, loans are really quite frowned upon, and something that people are very, very anxious about. And for something like an entrepreneur, a loan is going to be quite essential and sometimes indispensable for running a new business. So is that sort of some of the concrete cases that you encountered?
I didn't particularly explore those type of cases when I was curating my paper, but I did come across what you were talking about, how certain religions also frown upon loans. So there's firms that actually kind of are able to provide money to these entrepreneurs or just the common person through a format that's not exactly borrowing. So there are like certain solutions that exist. But I didn't really study how much they impact, like how much they help with financial literacy and exactly how many firms exist of these sort. But yeah, I do know that they exist. But my paper mainly focused more on I guess venture creation, entrepreneurship, and how that like specifically plays out in developing countries. I didn't focus as much on the other side of it.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's quickly pivot. I'm also curious to hear a little bit more about what your experience was like, for one, working with Dr. Agassi, but also just working with your peers who come from all over the world and surely are also sort of aspiring entrepreneurs and researchers and so on. Tell me a little bit about that experience. What was it like studying something like entrepreneurship in this sort of context?
Yeah, working with Dr. Agassi was really fun, and it was actually really eye-opening because it was one of the first times where I got to interact with somebody who has so much knowledge on the subject of entrepreneurship. And I was able to learn a lot of things in depth that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And just throughout the program, we were able to, reach out to him and get very valuable feedback when we were working on our papers. And it like kind of taught me how to kind of look at things in a different way. And just aside from that, working with my peers in the program has been really great because we have kind of this like group that we could always reach out to in case we need something when it came to working on our paper or just clarifying things. And it was really helpful in getting through the program when there was things that we didn't particularly understand or things we wanted to clarify. And we always were able to reach out to each other. And I think that was really great to have a group of people who were really interested in learning and just just getting to learn about their topics that they wanted to study kind of showed like how there's so much to see on entrepreneurship. I think every one of us is studying or researching something different for our papers. We have like things from investment to financial literacy, which is mine. So it was really interesting to see how different people, what different people think of when they think of entrepreneurship. And it was a really great experience overall.
And one other question, I feel like this might be especially pertinent to you. I asked it of quite a few of the students who come through CCIR, but I imagine one reason you were so interested in this particular course of entrepreneurship and startup financing is surely that you have certain sorts of aspirations or hopes with respect to this field. Has that sort of aspect of approaching this course informed your experience on the one hand, and has the course itself maybe changed your understanding of what potentially pursuing a career in this field would look like?
Yeah, so I've as I like kind of mentioned earlier, I've been interested in pursuing a career in entrepreneurship and finance, more leaning towards finance. But through this program, I was kind of see like how I was able to see how they can merge together and kind of the overlaps, which really gives me like something else to look forward to if in my career, something that I can explore more. Also, I wasn't super aware about financial literacy and stuff. So just the research process has made me a lot more aware in different topics in finance in itself. But also mostly the programs that I had been doing before this, when it came to entrepreneurship and finance, were more self-study, kind of understanding and absorbing knowledge. But this research program really was able to teach me like the same things, but in much more depth. And I was able to understand why things work the way they do. So that kind of really opened my eyes up to the field in entrepreneurship and finance both. And I think it's really taught me a lot when it comes to making decisions for in the future what I want to do. And I definitely want to explore more.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really great to hear. Definitely one of the goals with this particular program in designing it as a research program is to sort of do this kind of learning by doing type philosophy, where the idea here is that in order to understand why people do these sorts of things, you have to kind of really put things into practice and engage in a research paper and so on. So that's really, really great to hear that the sort of pedagogical aims of the program have actually been met here. Excellent. So I want to also just quickly ask, one thing I like to wrap up these interviews with is a general question for the students about sort of what they would say to, because research, I imagine, even in your case, was a difficult process. I imagine it wasn't easy writing your final paper and so on. But for students who might be daunted about the process, who might be sort of hesitating about whether or not to embark and spend a whole bunch of their summer or a whole bunch of their school year doing a research project, what would you sort of say to them in terms of the takeaways of this experience?
I think it's definitely scary at first to see you have to write such a huge research paper, especially when you haven't done something of this sort before. But just the things you learn from it, I think are definitely worth it. Just going through the process and writing so much about a specific topic kind of really teaches you how to deep dive into a certain topic. Because oftentimes we just scratch the surface. We don't really go into much depth. So I would say that it's definitely something you should, if you're thinking about it, definitely go for it, because you will learn a lot from the process. And if you manage your time properly and take things slowly, it's definitely not too difficult to do. And the things you learn from it are definitely worth it to do so.
Cool, excellent. Any final words that you would like to share before we begin wrapping this up?
No, I would just like to say that I really enjoy the program, and I think it was really great, and I was able to learn a lot from it.
Excellent. Well, that's really, really excellent to hear, Muskaan. With that, I will say thank you so much for taking your time to do this meeting. It was excellent to learn about your experience and also your project. I wish you the best of luck in starting your own business in the future. And thank you so much for your time today.